think Luke Kelly sang his heart out. That's what I honestly think. I don't, some people just actually do that.
He could walk down Grafton Street with that big mop of red hair, and he couldn't walk 10 feet, but someone would be shouting or waving at him. And a lot of the time we thought that was kind of because of the Dublins and everything, but it was much bigger than him being a singer or a folk singer.
I think it happened with Luke, and it happened with Phil Lynott, and it happened with Rory Gallagher. People who never knew them or never even went to hear them feel an affinity because of the soulfulness of what they did, and because they were just such big people, I think. They gave so much of themselves that it affected everybody.
I haven't sentimentalised Luke in any way, and I don't want to because there's no necessity to. I'm just speaking. But the fact is, I actually can't think of anything negative to say about Luke.
There was no point in him singing a song unless it came from somewhere within himself, or unless it was something that he felt validly able to express.
It's a rebel voice, rebel music, but not the obvious north-south connotations. In fact, he was never obvious about the way he'd approach a subject.
The songs that he sang and the way that I think he kept faith with the songs and felt the songs are all about the celebration of life and of the downtrodden and of the good things in life.
The whole folk music revival was about protests of injustice, protests about poverty. They were songs of the ordinary people.
He's a communist. If you think about that, that's kind of mad, isn't it?
He was a pop star, you know what I mean, among folk musicians, you know what I mean,
Everywhere he went, he was expected to be Luke Kelly, the character, and all these people you hear with Luke Kelly stories, And I think there's a Luke Kelly industry about to start.
No pipe did hang our battle drum, did sound its dread tattoo, but the Angelus bell o'er the Liffey swell rang out in the foggy dew. Right proudly high over Dublin town, they hung out the flag of war.
What made Luke completely different was that when he would select a song, he would sing it with so much passion and so much conviction that it was a message. That's what he did instead of writing articles or marching or standing up on platforms sloganizing. He used his banjo and he used his voice. It is the stuff of cold chills. It's the stuff of revolution.
Well, in the merry month of May, now from me home I started, left the girls and children nearly broken hearted, saluted father dear, kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, me grief and tears was smothered enough to...
Well, Luke was born into a very poor city. He was born on the periphery of the docks, down to Five Lamps. That would have been an area of high unemployment, emigration, and quite an amount of poverty. A place where people were in want a lot of the time. But at the same time, there was a great life among the people.
We lived in a one-room cottage in Latimore Place. Communal toilet, a communal tap outside that about 8 families shared. Poverty of the utmost.
Luke Kelly's father worked in Jacob's biscuit factory where he met his wife, Julia Fleming. Young Luke, the fourth of their 6 children, was born at home on November the 17th, 1940.
We realised that particular morning that something was amiss. We were asked to leave the house
And when we were called back in, we realised there was a newborn baby with loads of red hair, and that was Luke.
When I was about 5, Luke was 4, we moved into Lawrence's Mansions. And it was like moving into a palace because we had 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, a separate kitchen and a separate bathroom. It was just a completely different world altogether.
Luke went to St Lawrence O'Toole's boys' school, run by the Christian Brothers, and reports show him to have been an exceptional student. But education was a luxury in his community, and like everyone else, he left school at the age of 12 to bring home a wage.
Nobody was any better off than anybody else. Consequently, everybody helped each other. And that's the way it was in those times.
People had to make do with little money, and the entertainment was the entertainment you made on the streets.
Street soccer was the great game of the day. Luke went on to join Home Farm Football Club and remained a lifelong fan of the sport. Meanwhile, he was attracted to another form of entertainment.
He was certainly influenced by the great stars at that particular time, which would be Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, and Bing Crosby. And then he was also into the big band sounds like Duke Ellington, Tommy Dorsey. That type of music, that was the scene at that particular time.
After their corporation flat was gutted by fire, the family moved to the suburb of Whitehall, a change Luke found difficult.
He was about 13 years of age, you see. A funny old age to be dragged out of a good neighbourhood.
He never really settled into Whitehall.
Backwards and forwards down to the old Sheriff Street. The flats. Used to love the flats.
Luke now tried his hand at a number of unsatisfactory jobs. But his interest in music was deepening, and he joined the inner city Marian Arts Society, where he acted, danced and sang.
Blueberry Hill by Fats Domino, that was his #1 at the time. Always singing.
Most young immigrants, when they left Ireland, they were leaving almost with a sense of disgust and goodbye to Dublin, looking forward to a different life. I think Luke turned his back on Dublin and was heading for Britain, probably thought he'd never come back.
I found my thrill.
In 1957, with little education and no trade, Luke joined the massive wave of young Irish immigrants to England. He lived an itinerant lifestyle in Manchester, Newcastle and Birmingham, and it was there that he would discover a radical new life and identity for himself.
When you were in England, did you have a job apart from singing?
I had about 50 jobs apart from singing. Well, I was cleaning lavatories, cleaning railways, cleaning windows, very rarely cleaning my face, mind you. I must admit I was a beatnik for a while.
It was in the early hours of the morning. We got up, we heard a knock, we got up, and this guy was standing at the door with a banjo slung over his shoulder, and his hair had grown, he had a small goatee beard. I stood in amazement and said, like, where have you been? What are you doing with yourself?
I was sitting in a pub in Newcastle on Tyne. It's a great singing area in England, Geordieland. I used to frequent jazz clubs, and some character said, well, the folk song club is starting tonight, I'm going along, you know. I said, well, can I come along with you? And away I went, you know. I was waiting to pay in, and there was a crowd of English people, surprisingly enough, singing the old triangle, singing the most wonderful harmonies, natural extemporaneous, and I fell for it straight away, and I haven't been at a jazz club since, and I've been singing folk songs ever since.
And the old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal.
Luke stayed behind in Birmingham and attached himself to the folk coterie that was there.
I bought a wife in Edinburgh for a bobby. I got a father back again to buy tobacco weed.
He was only interested in developing a repertoire, which was very important to him, and he absorbed songs.
What happened to him in England, in Birmingham, it was a massive educational process.
Passionate to learn about singing, Luke joined the socialist Clarion Singers Choir, where he met the Irish communist and scholar Sean Mulready and his Republican wife Molly.
She adopted him and she civilised him. She had his teeth seen to, had his hair cut, got him a suit, and he got a job. And a year later, there was quite a presentable young fella going around the folk song clubs and working desperately hard to learn material. That was what he lived for, was to learn songs.
Luke was now attending night school. He was learning about literature and left-wing politics from the Mulreadys, but was also profoundly influenced by George Thompson, professor of classics at Birmingham University and a member of the executive committee of the Communist Party. Luke was now fully articulate in anti-establishment politics and an active member of CND and the Young Communist League.
Young people then hadn't ever heard a word about communism or socialism. These were alien and terrible ideas. When you actually were introduced to the literature and you began to read it, it was like saying, well, this makes sense.
Now, the burning issue in the early 60s was the fact that we had planes circling above with nuclear weapons in them. And the wrong message, could start off at the annihilation of civilization as we knew it. This was a very worrying thing. And of course, there was no folk song that could deal with that. Luke loved that song. It became a sort of anthem for the campaign for nuclear disarmament, the CND. He was known as Luke, Sun is Burning Kelly.
The sun is burning in the sky. Strands of cloud go slowly drifting by. In the park, the dreamy bees are droning in the flowers among the trees, and the sun is in the sky. Now the sun is in the west. Little kids lay down to take their rest, and the couples in the park are holding hands and waiting for the dark. And the sun is in the west.
Luke was a fairly tough Dublin sort of background, but he wasn't just your average guy. I realised that almost straight away, because average guys didn't read, Jean-Paul Sartre and Kerouac and all that sort of stuff.
George Thompson, who had great influence in Eastern Europe, offered him a place at Prague University and had assured him, had it organised. And in 1962, Luke had two choices. He could go to Prague University, he could come home to Ireland to try his luck at ballad singing, and he chose Ireland. He chose to come back to Ireland. But he could have gone to university.
Before settling in Ireland, Luke completed his musical apprenticeship under the legendary Ewan MacColl and his London-based folk group, The Critics. Although he always cited MacColl as his greatest musical influence, their relationship was never an easy one.
People would do performances and then they would be criticised by the others, and it was like a bloody, trial by ordeal,
For young Jamie Foyers in battle was slain.
At the end of the performance, when he's been absolutely decimated by Ewan, I remember sort of Luke, the head down, sort of shaking his head like that, but there was a smile on his face. He wasn't devastated himself. He was up. I assume he was saying to himself, fuck this. He saw that MacColl was such a good songwriter. He was a great songwriter. He wasn't a great singer, and he certainly wasn't a great, he was guilty of a lot of intellectual dishonesty, but in the songs he was very influential. And I think Luke took that back with him. And he saw, I'm not interested in all the rest of the shit, but the songs are great, and the songs that have been pointed out to me that are traditional songs are great as well. That's what I need, and he took that away.
Well, he said himself that he was re-seduced. He said when he left Ireland in 58, 59, he never intended to come back. But as he began coming back and forth during the early 60s, he could see this enormous change going on. And it was clearly the right place for him and the right time, and he was the right person.
Luke had just come back from England, and we met. And the first thing that annoyed me is I was very, very sort of didn't like this English thing at all, you know. The English folkies used to drive me mad, and to a certain extent still do, but, you know, the way everything is so precious and all. And Luke had a lot of experience in England, you know, with a lot of these folky people. And then he said to me, "Now, mate," so that was the first row I had with Luke. He said, "Don't, etc., call me mate. My name is Ronnie."
Got no kick against Marvin Jack. Unless they try to...
The Ireland Luke returned to was in the throes of great social change. The monoliths of church, state and employer that had regulated the country since the Civil War were beginning to break down.
No country in the history of the world has endured the hemorrhage which this island endured over a period of a few years of so many of her sons and daughters.
The composer Sean O'Reilly was a major influence in the new popularity of traditional Irish music. Luke said he was thunderstruck at his first experience of a fleadh cheoil in Milltown, Malbay.
And then Luke started coming into O'Donoghue's pub to meet Barney and myself and have a drink. And one Christmas Eve, I think it was, Barney's memory will probably be different than mine, usually is. Barney and I said to Paddy O'Donoghue, "Can we play a few tunes, Paddy?" You know, "Oh, well, yeah, but keep it down, don't make it too, you know." So we played, and since that day, Donoghue's has been packed with punters.
The first song I ever heard Luke singing was, I'll sing a little bit of it. "Oh, come all ye tramps and hawking lads and ganderers ablaw, that roam the country round and round, come listen one and all. I'll sing to you a roving tale of the sights that I have seen, for it's far unto the snowy north and south by Gretna Green."
At that time, Dublin was a much smaller city, and the journalists knew me and I knew them, so instead of saying Barney McKenna, Ronnie Drew, Luke Kelly and Kieran Burke, they just called it the Ronnie Drew Group.
As down that glen came McAlpine's men, with their shovels slung behind them.
One day we did a rehearsal, which was a very, very strange thing for the Dubliners to have done, because we used to rehearse it when we'd be singing and all that. And somebody said, "Well, the Ronnie Drew Group's kind of this, and we should call it something else," and all that. So Luke happened to be reading a copy of James Joyce's Dubliners. So he said, "Why not call it the Dubliners?" And that was it.
The Dubliners, Ireland's first urban folk group, were now central to the Irish folk scene. They signed with Transatlantic Records and began recording, touring and playing regularly in the Embankment, the Abbey Tavern and O'Donoghue's pub. It was in O'Donoghue's that Luke met and started a relationship with the American singer and actress Deirdre O'Connell.
Why I am slighted so by thee, I'm so in love I can't.
The Dubliners signed up with Major Minor and began recording and touring more intensively.
My heart lies smothered in my breast. It's not for
Deirdre and Luke were married in Dublin. In 1967, the Dubliners' first single was banned, causing a major controversy that would help to make them stars.
I was living in England myself when 7 Drunken Nights was a hit. And that just changed everything.
Oh, as I went home on Monday night, as drunk could be, I saw a horse outside the door, where my old horse should be. Well, I called me wife and I said to her, "Will you kindly tell to me who owns that horse outside the door, where my old horse should be?" "Ah, you're drunk, you silly old fool, still you cannot see that's a lovely sow that me mother sent to me."
I think that everyone was delighted when the Dubliners broke through, because they achieved something that we had been trying to do and never managed. They actually popularised folk music.
And as I went home on Tuesday night, as drunk could be,
I seem to remember not liking anything that was called folk, especially Irish folk music. I thought it was crap. And so did everyone on our street, because we came from suburban Ballymun, Nowheresville. It was like outer space. There was no sense of culture at all that I remember. People who laid it on thick were to be avoided. They were the enemy when I was a kid. Then there was the Dubliners. They're just a complete exception to that. They were more like the Rolling Stones or the Clash.
But buttons in a blanket shawl I never saw before.
I think Ronnie first heard about it from some show band that was over in London at the time. They said, "You're in the charts this week." And Ronnie's reaction, I remember, was, he said, "Is that good or bad?" And he wasn't trying to be funny.
None of us were under any delusions that we were now stars. We were just going to get more readies for gigs and make more money for Porter.
They represented by their very difference. They were anarchic, they had beards, which they sang rude songs, they didn't dress alike, they didn't behave nicely. Markedly different from the Clancy brothers, although they were close friends, I think, and markedly different from anything that had gone before.
Luke got a terrific buzz out of that, I'd say, because he loved Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney and the Beatles. He was in his element there, for a short while.
And now, live from New York, Ed Sullivan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What could be more appropriate than for Sullivan from County Cork to open our St. Patrick's Day show with 5 bearded Irishmen from Dublin: Ronnie Drew, Kieran Burke, Luke Kelly, Barney McKenna, and John Sheehan. So let's have a fine opening welcome for my Irishmen.
The way the music was done and the way the songs were sung, it suggested a lifestyle we embraced, kind of madness, plenty of crack, plenty of porter and plenty of singing and plenty of women, all that kind of thing. It was great.
In the days I went to sporting, I was never tired of sporting. To an alehouse or a playhouse, and many's the house besides. I told me brother Seamus I'd go off and be right famous, and I never would return again till I roamed the world wide. Goodbye, Martin Durbin, sure I'm sick and tired of working. No more I'll leave the tradies and no longer.
Every time you do a gig, the natural thing was to go drink and live it up. And because we could all manage to perform the next day. Don't ask me how, but we seem to be able to. Because we'd be going into places and meeting people like Keith Moon. Would be in the club. One night we went into a place and he'd play the drums in the lobby and have a drink. And the drink was a bottle of champagne each, like bottles of stout. We were all going over drinking these bottles of champagne. I remember going into a place called the Speakeasy Club in London with Luke, and we met Jimi Hendrix and Paul McCartney, and it was like backstage at some pantomime or something, the way everybody was dressed up.
Luke's political conscience was keener than ever. He used the Dubliners' international success to bring public attention to the struggle of the dispossessed.
There was a very strong commitment growing from about the need for justice, a protest against all forms of injustice. The anti-apartheid movement, Mandela being imprisoned, the war in Vietnam, the civil rights movement across America.
I think Luke Kelly and the Dubliners were a fusion of the struggles of the blacks in America and indeed the liberal civil rights supporters. And he linked the struggles of the civil rights movement in America and the struggles for the civil rights marchers in Northern Ireland.
Well, I think that there's no doubt at all that in 1968 and indeed the 1960s, that the civil rights movement in the United States, in particular in the leadership and impact of Martin Luther King, had an enormous influence right across the world. And it certainly had a very big influence here in Northern Ireland.
But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
We were looking in the civil rights movement for equality of treatment for both sections of our people. And when it was boiled down, we were talking in terms of one person, one vote. And we were talking in terms of the fair allocation of public housing and fair allocation of employment.
Catholics here are faced with blatant social injustice.
And this forces moderate people into immoderate actions.
In Alabama in 1958, the cost of human life is very low. A man that's black is trampled down just like them.
Luke was very much in tune with the struggle of people in Northern Ireland to have a voice, to be heard. But I wouldn't describe him as a nationalist. He was more of an internationalist.
Now every man may walk his road in peace, for all are free.
The pressures were there, all that touring, and you know it was constant going, and then when you'd come home, they'd be like, you just keep it up. We'd be up in Donegal, we'd be round the town drinking. I suppose it does have an effect, a cumulative effect somewhere.
One casualty of the Dubliners' frenetic lifestyle was Luke's marriage to Deirdre.
Luke would not sort of disclose or discuss his private affairs with anybody. He would talk about anything in the world, anything, but that part of his life was his, and that's as it should be.
Whenever he discussed it with people outside,
Maybe
but he
so.
certainly never, ever.
I went to see my mother one night, and on a Saturday night, and I was coming back into town, driving in, and Luke was standing at the bus stop just beside Whitehall Church there, and you couldn't miss Luke with the hair and everything. And I stopped and gave him a lift into town. It was about 7 o'clock, which is a kind of quiet time on a Saturday night. And he said, do you fancy a pint? So we went and had a drink, and we had a few drinks. He talked a lot about politics, which he was fascinated by, and he wasn't too happy with my politics at the time, and I was very interested in politics too. So we had a political argument. Then we talked about soccer, and then he talked about children, family, about his wife Deirdre and how things hadn't worked out. And there was a real sadness. I thought he was a lonely man. Whereas I was expecting we'd be out all night, which both of us were well capable of. The night sort of petered out into a melancholy thing, and I think we left before the closing time. And he went off, and I think he said, I'm going home. You know, and he was going nowhere. It was sad, and I was actually going home to a family. And after that sort of night with him, I had a different understanding of him, you know.
See, Luke was a frustrated pop singer, actor, clown, comic. He just, whatever he was at the moment, he wanted to be something else the next moment. So when they wanted to do a new album, they decided that, well, they wanted to go a new direction, you know.
Give us a look. Yeah, that's one of the new lot of photographs.
I inherited the Dubliners during one of their fallow periods, I suppose. And I saw a great challenge there to inject a bit of fresh air, something new into the Dubliners. The one guy who was gung-ho to go for it was Kelly. One of the songs that we had talked about doing was Joe Hill, and Luke sang it in the studio, just Luke and the banjo. And Luke had this peculiar knack of playing the banjo and looking kind of into the middle distance, and his knee just kind of going in and out, keeping time with the tune. It was a particularly unique Kelly trait. But he sang Joe Hill, and I thought, great, that's a great song. But it's an American song. We're like, yeah. So I said, I hear this, we should give this a bit of an American flavour. And I can remember going to the piano and doing
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
He never hesitated to sing for the anti-apartheid movement, for the peace movement, for left-wing causes, for workers, for various struggles. Luke identified with all of those, and he brought a very powerful message to audiences all over the world. And when you look at the songs, you look at the material he chose, it was always that message of hope about workers, about struggles, about love, about people.
The copper bosses, they shot you, Joe. They filled you full of lead. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe, and I ain't dead. Says Joe, and I ain't dead.
Oh, Phil is a craftsman. He's not a genius. We discussed this last time I saw him. No, he's no genius, as he admits himself. I'm only quoting himself. But he's a very, very good craftsman. Well, I wouldn't have believed it until he played me this tape of various songs. It was a demo tape of various songs, about 5 songs. And about the 3rd song into the demo tape, this, I thought, marvellous song came along. It was called Scorn Out of Simplicity.
I actually met him in town one day, and he seemed to be very excited. And he went on to tell me a story that Phil Coulter had wrote this song called Scorn Out His Simplicity.
He was doing the singing on this demo tape and playing guitar. And he was crying, he was sobbing.
This was
you
the
could
one
hear the emotion, you could hear the emotion coming out.
This was the song which you subsequently recorded about his own child, wasn't it?
It was his own child. It was an autistic child, I'm not sure, but which has since died. And I insisted on getting my hands on that one.
Luke just zeroed in on it right away. It kind of dismissed the other songs, which at first I thought were great, but Kelly dismissed them and said, that's the song I want.
And he was reluctant. He said no. I said yes. He said no. I said yes. I want that one. Because I'm not interested in the rest of them unless you give me that one. He said okay. I said no. I said okay. We'll go into the studio. Let me have my hands on it. And if it works, we'll put it out. If it doesn't work, we'll forget it.
He went on to describe the arrangement, and he said, if you listen to it, Johnny, you'll hear the piano playing, and then in a certain section, you'll hear the boom, boom, and that was the dullness of the mind.
See the child with the golden hair, but eyes that show the emptiness inside.
And if you think of people who are blessed with Down syndrome babies or with children who are in some way disabled, I think it gives them a place, gives them ownership, and it's a recognition.
Well, Luke didn't like singing Scorn Out of Simplicity on stage, I know that. He didn't like sentimentality, I didn't like sentimentality, but there is a difference between sentimentality and a song. You can have feeling in a song.
He looks almost like the others, yet they know he's not the same. Scorn not his simplicity, but rather try to love him all the more. Scorn not his simplicity, oh no, oh no.
I suppose I recognised in him what happened to him when he began to sing a song. It's something I recognise in myself, that when I'm singing a song, nothing can get to me. When he sang a song, he went into the song and he lived the song. And I suspect that when he sang a song, there was a film that ran in his head, and nothing could distract him from that. He was a very intense singer, he was very passionate.
Scorn not his simplicity, oh no, oh no, oh
no. The song Free the People, which was written as a reaction to that whole internment thing, and written out of anger, I suppose. I recorded with Luke and the Dubliners within a matter of days, I think within a week of the actual event. And then a few weeks after that, we held this anti-internment rally called the Free the People rally in the National Stadium. And we had all sorts of people there, John Hume and Austin Curry, as two of the spokespeople for, I suppose, the nationalist community in the north, those who had been targeted by this internment thing.
Irishmen have been interned in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and in the 60s and now in the 70s again. And what we are saying to the people of the north and what we are saying to the people throughout this country, let us make sure this time that there will be no internment in the 80s.
Laws were made for people. The law can never scorn the right of of a man to be free. We the people, let them have their say. We the people, let them see the light of day.
Any society which needs laws like that is a sick society. And we intend, this time, to end the system of government that needs internment to survive.
And of course, Kelly was there in the middle of it all, fire in the belly as usual, and giving it pelter.
And standing there as big as life, and smiling with his eyes, says Joe, what they forgot to kill went on to organize.
Following the killing of 13 civil rights marchers in Derry on Bloody Sunday, Luke attended funerals of the victims.
I always mind the fact that Luke is, presented as this working class hero. I think like most people who are adventurous and curious about life, like whatever it brought to him, he just caught onto it with gusto.
Jesus, I am overjoyed to meet you face to face. You've been getting quite a name all around the place.
He desperately wanted to be an actor. When Superstar came out, it was announced, he says to me, there's only gigs in there for me. I said, this is not for you. He said, there's a great song in there, Herod Walk Across the Swimming Pool. So he loved the song, and he loved the whole thing. So I said, okay, let's have a go at it.
So you're Christ, you're the great Jesus Christ. Prove to me that you're no fool. Walk across my swimming.
I'm terrified out of my life.
Why is this?
First of all, I don't know my words. And secondly, I don't know where my feet are. I'm supposed to dance in this.
You're only telling the truth. I think everybody was shocked when he came out in the big robe and the crown. I think the sigh of relief from Luke was bigger than from the audience when he got through the dance scene.
The only dance I ever learned was the slow. What do you remember the slow waltz?
The lurch.
The lurch, yes.
So if you are the Christ, you're the great Jesus Christ. Prove to me that you're divine. Change my water into wine. That's all you need do, and I'll know it's all true. Come on, King of the Jews.
I think if you're not moved by this show, then there's something lacking in your sense of Christianity. This is the most.
There's not a waste of time in the cow.
Yeah, this is the most reaffirming show.
Yeah, fabulous.
That I've ever seen. I didn't believe before I came into rehearsal. I didn't bother reading the script or listening to the record because I didn't want to be influenced by that. But I never expected to have the profundity that it has.
Hey, are you scared of me, Christ? Mr. Wonderful Christ.
You're a joke! You're not the Lord! You're nothing but a fraud!
Well, nobody could believe it. And at the rehearsals, the whole thing was he had to do three things. He had to remember the lines, sing and dance at the one time. And it was just hilarious. He had this 1 5-minute dance which took about 2 weeks to get it right.
Is it true that you're playing Herod as a queer?
A pig's ear, yeah.
Ninja queer?
No, there'll be a touch of that. There'll be a touch of camp in it because I can't imagine myself trying to play a queer in that way. I don't think I'd be able to manage that. You don't want me to act as well, dancing and singing and acting too. It must be jesting.
I always think there's nothing more attractive to a young woman than a bad boy, and that's what Luke was. It may have become a cliched chat-up line, but very few men then had the charisma to walk into a room and go over to a woman and say, you are gorgeous, or you're beautiful, or I want to go to bed with you. And boy, Luke Kelly could.
But he had a plus that, like, I had a wife and 2 children. Like, Luke didn't involve himself in that area of, I suppose he never paid an ESB bill or a gas bill or a phone bill. He didn't drive a car, he didn't have a bicycle. So he had no constraints. Where he was where he was, and that was it. He didn't have raggle-taggle baggage hanging after him. and he could decide to stay at my house or whatever house, and it didn't matter. I'd have to go home at some stage. Luke didn't really have that constraint upon him.
There's something about his very stature as a person that's kind of striking to Irish people. I think that's why. I think it's a visual as well as the sound of his voice.
When I started off looking for songs, the first thing I looked for in a song was there a bit of crack in it? You know, that's what I was looking for. But then I saw that Luke was looking for something different.
We've got to get on stage in 2 minutes.
It'd be too easy to say that he was looking for a political aspect. It was deeper than that. He was a great judge of a good song, of a big song. He didn't just sing any song that came his way. He was very discerning.
And when times got rough, there was just about enough, but we saw it through without complaining. For deep inside was a burning pride in the town I love.
Kamikaze town. Here we go.
But when I returned, how my eyes have burned to see how a town could be brought to its knees by the armored cars and the bombed out.
Well, The Town I Love So Well for the people of Derry is a very, very emotive song. It's very much about Derry. The words of it are very moving. There's music there in the Derry air. I mean, we're very proud of our musical tradition in this city. That's part of the positive thing. And of course, it talks about the tanks and the guns. Oh my God, what have you done to the town I love so well? The terrible damage done by the Troubles.
With their tanks and their guns, oh my God, what have they done to the town I loved so well?
Now our music's gone, but we still carry on. Our spirit's been bruised, never broken. We will not forget. In other words, we will remember the terrible things of our past, but our hearts are set on tomorrow and peace once again. For what's done is done, and what's won is won, and what's lost is lost and gone forever. And then the hope. I can only pray for a bright brand new day for the town I love so well.
For what's done is done, and what's won is won, and what's lost is lost and gone forever. I can only pray for a bright, brand new day in the town I love so well.
Luke Kelly particularly had an affinity with radical causes. What's happened in the north, well, The Town I Love So Well in many ways sums that up.
What causes us to do what we do is a love of singing and a love of songs. And then somewhere along the way, some of us encounter success, commercial success, and other interests come on board. And I remember I think it was Tommy Potts said once that it's very, very dangerous for a musician or a singer to accept money for the work, because as soon as you do, your attitude changes. And I can see that quite clearly now. And some of us have been affected more deeply than others by our mixing in with the business aspect of things. And sometimes it can have a very bad effect on a person's attitude towards the work, you know. And I certainly would be aware of a very big change in the Luke Kelly that I heard, the tapes of the Luke Kelly I heard singing in 62 and 63, to what he became. because the same thing happened to myself at times, you know. We got led astray by Shambula. That it's not the intensity of the singing that gets us down, it's the intensity of what happens when the gig is over, really. It's all the madness that goes on. You know, if you're in Berlin or if you're in Hamburg or if you're in London and there's hundreds of people who want to get a bit of the action, and you know, it's particularly when you finish a good gig, your adrenaline is really pumping, you know, and the last thing you would think of doing is going to bed.
I mean, I remember one night in a bar in Copenhagen, some people just kept coming up and putting these drinks on the table, so that at the end of an hour, I mean, I can't remember what the drink was. I think there were about, 14 glasses of vodka or whiskey or whatever it was. And the 10th person that came up, I said, hey, I mean, how much drink do you think he can take? You know, it was as if he was being forced into a role.
It made a kind of self-destructive and creative thing almost one and the same. You know, if you could drink enough and do enough other things, it was a proof of genius.
It was an occupational hazard. At that time, it was almost expected of people, being drunk and falling down drunk and all the rest of it. A lot of punters kind of expected to see that, and if they didn't see it, they were kind of disappointed.
You know, in certain places in Germany, when they drive, there'd be a case of whiskey for them in the dressing room, you know. And that everybody thought that the only way to get to them was to buy them drink, and they just... Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, after a concert, they just wanted to go home or go to be with themselves. But it was always a group of stage door Johnnies. There was always 10 or 20 people waiting for them.
I mean, you could never see a poster or a record cover or anything that didn't have drink involved in it at that stage. There were always pints on tables or this, that, or the other. I mean, adverts for drink, and it took its toll.
The key would drink anything, you know. He would drink beer, he would drink whiskey, he would drink gin, he would drink vodka. He would just mix it, he would just go.
But I'd say myself that he used drink as I did myself to give me courage to go out and do what I love doing. But like, you start off doing something in a room among friends and it's great, but then you start getting up on the stage and doing it, and then you start kind of becoming well known for it, and it's a different ball game, you know. So you might need a few jars just to settle it down a bit, you know.
Kelly was never very good at looking after himself. You always, by the look of him, you knew that he was not getting 3 square meals a day, that's for sure, not getting any sleep or whatever. And you also, for a long period, got the feeling that he badly needed looking after, if you like.
Well, in the merry month of May, from my home I started, left the girl from June, nearly broken hearted, salute to father dear. Kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, me life and tears to smother that up to reap the corn, leave where I was born. Cut the stuff back down the varnish, ghosts and goblins, a brand new pair of ropes to rock all over the box, right all the miles of rope. First produced me crystal and I then produced me radio. Sing, stand and deliver, for you are of old deceiver, mushering, dum-a-doo, dum-a-da. Breathe that dream by the old canal. I kissed my girl by the factory wall. Dirty old town, dirty old town.
I think, well, we knew each other for about a year. And at some point before that, Luke wanted me to see the house, and he asked me to come over to the house. And he basically, I remember him standing in the sitting room and with his arms up to the ceiling and saying, one day this will be a palace.
Well, it was a very, very strong relationship. They lived the last 8 years of his life very, very happily together, I thought. They at the time when Madeleine met Luke first, the house she lived in Dartmouth Square was just a house, but together they made a home of it.
By now the Dubliners were a commercial product, and Luke's life as a singer was haunted by a sense of failed ambition and a loss of focus.
I can only hazard a guess and say that he was trapped. You get trapped because you feel obligated to the other members, and you feel obligated to all the families and the whole thing that happens when a band becomes commercially successful. There's a little kind of a town starts up. And Luke, being the kind of person he was, as I expect, probably felt obligated to keep going. Maybe when he would have preferred to have been back singing the way he was singing in the early 60s, when he lived for songs and for singing, and not for big stages and Top of the Pops.
His private side came out more, and he didn't tolerate as many people. He only wanted to have people around him he really liked and wanted to be with, and whose company he enjoyed.
He was a more introspective individual. A lot of his singing in latter years reflected that introspection. He began to think more about emotions, more about people, more about the sense of friendship, love, and what was going to happen to him later in life.
On a Raglan road, on an autumn day, I met her first and knew that her dark hair could weave a snare that I might one day rue.
We were in a pub. We won't name the pub. I don't suppose it's allowed on television. Well, it was in the Bailey anyway. And he was singing in his own peculiar manner, and so was I, in my own peculiar manner. And he said, "I've got a song for you." And he said, "You should sing Raglan Road."
On Raglan Road of an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger and I passed along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street in November, we trip lightly along the ledge of a deep ravine where can be seen the worth of passion's play.
I used to meet Luke fairly regularly, and I remember on one occasion he was going through a great new song, which I think was a great new song then, and is still a great song, Raglan Road. And of course, I always regarded myself, being a Derryman, as a bit of a singer, and he taught me Raglan Road, and I still sing it occasionally.
Well, the way he sang Raglan Road, I think, was brilliant, you know. I think he's done the best version of Raglan Road I've ever heard, you know.
On a quiet street where all ghosts meet,
the dawn of day.
The first indication we got that there was something wrong, we were doing a gig in Reykjavik. We flew up via Glasgow the day before, and the next morning around breakfast time, Luke rang me in from his room to my room and said, "Where are we?" And I said, "What do you mean, where are we?" He said, "I haven't a clue where I am. I just looked out the window there and saw some shops across the road. I don't recognise the language or anything." I said, "We're in Iceland." He said, "What in the name of Jesus are we doing in Iceland?" And then I realised for the first time that he wasn't joking. You know, he didn't have a clue where he was. And it's not like he was drunk the night before.
No, it seemed to be
normal
perfectly
amount.
normal. And you come down to the lobby, he said, "I'm sitting here with Luke and he's a very frightened man." So I went down and I never saw anybody as terrified
Completely disorientated.
Absolutely
yeah.
terrified. He was white, he was shaking, it had nothing to do with booze.
He knew he was away somewhere.
He knew he was
because
away, yeah.
The bottles of duty free beside the bed, but they were still closed.
When he used to get these headaches to be written off the hangovers, you know. But it obviously had a terrific toll on his body.
Sometimes you get this rush of adrenaline where your hands start shaking, you know. And Luke would often say to me, "If you get it, I'll jump in." The song, and I'd say to him, "If you get it, I'll jump in." And I noticed his hands beginning to shake and the voice beginning to tremble. So I tried to jump in. I didn't, for a moment, think there was anything serious wrong.
I remember standing in the wings and he started, the words were coming out wrong and he started shaking and
the next thing he was lying down beside me, and that was the night he was carted off to the Wilton Hospital and had his first operation.
I went into hospital after the operation when I was allowed to go in after he was out of the intensive care. And he was lying on his side, and when I came into the room he turned around and he seemed to be like the person he always was, except he had a bandage around his head, you know.
For the 2 months he was recovering, fans from all over Europe, Australia and America contacted Luke with get well wishes. Then it seemed to be back to business.
In 1844, I landed on the Liverpool shore. Me belly was empty, me hands were raw, with working on the railway, the GNR. I am weary of the railway, now Paddy works on the railway. In 1845, and Daniel O'Connell, he was alive. Daniel O'Connell, he was alive and working on the railway.
When Luke started to become ill, often it would be mistaken for, like, people would think, oh yeah, he just had too much to drink, and often that wasn't the case. And in fact, he gave up drink for a few years, and I would hear people saying, oh, saw Luke Kelly drunk the other night, and he wasn't drinking, or he might have been with me, or so stories were always made up a lot and exaggerated, I think.
I mean, it was a terrible time for him for the next few years because he would forget things, forget words and some of songs that he'd known for years. That was a result of his operation and so on.
Unable to live and sing as before, Luke spent more time at home with Madeline and became increasingly reclusive.
I think it was the spring of 1983, and I had got word, in fact, that Luke was not very well. So I did, in fact, make approaches to Jack Phillips, who was his physician at the time, and I went to see him in the Richmond Hospital, knowing full well that other people, in fact, in Dublin knew very well about Luke's health. And there was an occasion then in the Leeson Lounge, and I went across to see him. He came across, he made a beeline for me, and he said, look, he said, I want to tell you, he said, you are not to be making inquiries about my health, he says. That's none of your business. And I thought that was rather odd, rather strange.
When I was quite worried about the tumour, and when there was recurrence, when we realised it was starting to grow back, and I had hoped to go to the Bristol cancer centre, which is an alternative place in England, and I'd been sent some literature from them, and one of the booklets I showed to Luke, I sort of gradually sort of introduced the whole idea to him, and when he saw something written on it that referred to cancer, he would say, "Cancer? Sure, I don't have cancer."
Walking all the day near tall towers where falcons build their nests.
Yeah, well, producing a Song for Ireland, which was the last song that Luke ever recorded in a recording studio, was an amazing experience for me. He had been quite ill at the time, and his mood in the studio was sort of mixed, so we decided that we'd just really get concentrated on it. And the rest of the Dubliners kind of went out and went for a walk and wandered around, and Luke began to really get concentrated on the song. And it took take after take after take, and despite the fact that he wasn't well, suddenly there came a moment in the studio where Luke appeared as Luke was, and the sheer power of his voice and just began to happen. And I remember the moment well, and everybody in the control room suddenly looked at each other and said, "Yeah, this is Luke." And it was amazing. It came at a time in his life when a lot of the early Luke wasn't really visible.
Saw one touch the bow. He played a reel which seemed so grand and gay. Stood on Dingle Beach and cast in wild foam. We found Atlantic bass living on your western shore. Saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland.
We weren't to know that very shortly afterwards he was going to leave us.
I must away now, I can no longer tarry. This morning's tempest I have to cross. I must be guided without a stumble into the arms I love the most. And when he came to his true love's dwelling, he knelt down gently upon a stone, and through her window he's whispered lowly, "Is my true love within at home? Wake up, love, it is thine own true lover. Wake up, love, and let me in, for I am tired, love, and oh so weary. Into the arms I love the most."
I remember going into the room and I would call his name and there was no response. And normally, after a little while, he would sort of at least open his eyes and I would know he was okay, just having a rest in. And when there was nothing, I got worried. And at some point during the night, they came out to me and said, basically, there was only a 50-50 chance. And that was the first indication to me that it was so serious. And I remember the next day they did a brain scan to see whether there was any basic brain function left, and later we were told there wasn't, and nothing could be done, basically.
Nobody could have anticipated the turnout. All of Dublin stopped. People gathered around that church, and there was real, genuine mourning. It was as though Parnell had died.
I remember Noel Ginnity saying to me at the funeral, if this guy had the slightest comprehension of how loved he was in this city, you know, he wouldn't have died on us.
I was outside the chapel at Whitehall when he was being buried. I was rushing to a meeting in Dublin, and I had hoped to be there for the Mass, and I always regretted not letting the meeting go. I always regretted not getting out and just being there and paying my own wee bit of personal homage. And you could see the throngs of people gathered.
Luke's singing, particularly his ability to deliver a song, is something that will sustain and will be something that future folk artists will always look back to as a reference and as an inspiration.
Well, I would have him as one of the great interpreters of songs because of the tack he took.
Which should make us really regard those recordings. Extraordinary voice, extraordinary, generous man who turned so much on its head in this country.
I think it's wrong to iconize people. You know, obviously he was just an ordinary person with his faults and his flaws like the rest of us, and I think, you know, we sometimes commit the error of putting people up on pedestals when they're dead. But I do think it's true to say that he kept faith with whatever being Irish is.
Then the old triangle could go jingle, jangle.
There hasn't been even a young voice in Ireland that's come anywhere close to that area that Kelly defined.
All along the banks of the Royal Canal. Thank you for the days, those endless days, those sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the days I won't forget a single day, believe me. I bless the light, I bless the light that lights on you, believe me. Now you're gone, you're with me every single day, believe me. Days I'll remember all my life, days when you can't see wrong from right. You took my life, but then I knew that very soon you'd leave me. But it's alright, now I'm not frightened of this world, believe me. I wish today could be tomorrow. The night is dark, it just brings sorrow, then it rains. Thank you for the days, those endless days, those sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the days I don't regret a single day, believe me. Days I'll remember all my life, days when you can't see wrong from right. You took my life, but then I knew that very soon you'd leave me. But it's alright, now I'm not frightened of this world, believe me. Thank you for the days, those endless days, those sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the days I bless the light, I bless the light that lights on you, believe me. And though you're gone, you're with me every single day, believe